think most people think that seeing your doppelganger is like living out a real-life Double Mint commercial.
Double gum, a double pleasure is waiting for you. Double gum.
But the stories that we have today are going to prove that it can have real-life consequences, and some of them not so good. This story was posted anonymously, so we're going to call him Tony. When Tony was around 15 years old, he and his grandmother had a bit of a war going on. She is a neat freak, and he is a 15-year-old boy. And one day, Tony comes home and finds her staring into his closet. She isn't moving at all. It's like she's suspended in the middle of cleaning the closet. And he asks her, "Grandma, are you okay?" But she totally ignores him. His 85-year-old grandmother just continues to stare into the closet. Suddenly, she turns her head slowly toward him and gives him a cold stare down. She has the evilest eyes he has ever seen, and a chill just goes up and down his spine. He thinks to himself, "Those are not my grandmother's eyes." And she looks back into the closet, walks in, and closes the door behind her. Tony takes a second to wrap his head around what he just saw, goes to his closet, and opens the door, but she's not there. She's completely gone. She's literally disappeared into thin air. And he freezes for a few seconds. Then he yells for her, "Grandma!" And hears her say, "I'm down in the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready." And he runs to the kitchen to find her standing there cooking away. Tony asks her, "Have you been here the whole time?" "Well, of course I was, dear. Dinner's not going to make itself." She has no idea what's just happened upstairs. What did Tony find in his bedroom that day? He still has no idea. This story is from an anonymous poster, so we will call her Nora. Nora's family loves the beach so much that when they take their yearly vacation, it could be raining and they would still be out there running on the sand. One year, they're on the beach looking for seashells, even though it was misting and there was a storm starting to brew. Nora's husband and their two oldest daughters decide to go back to the cottage where they're staying to go get some lunch. And the 4-year-old wants to continue hunting seashells with her mom. Well, as it happens all the time with kids, as soon as they left, the little girl changes her mind and decides to go with Dad and the other girls. Well, they're only about 20 feet away, so Nora calls for them and says, "Wait up, you guys. I guess she's coming with you." And Nora makes sure that they have her before she turns away to finish her seashell hunting. Nora walks for about 20 minutes, enjoying the alone time, until the weather starts to turn really rough. The mist is getting thicker and the waves are really starting to churn. And she looks out at the ocean and realizes that she's never seen it so rough. And she turns away with a feeling of unexplained dread that she just can't shake. She looks out into the ocean again and sees her 4-year-old drowning in the waves. She knows with absolute certainty that her daughter is safe back in the cottage with her father and siblings, but yet here she is drowning in the rough seas. Nora starts wading into the water to try to save her daughter. She is in full-on panic mode, crying, hysterical. She knows if she goes into that water, she's going to drown. But there she is, wading in, even though she knows that it's not really her baby out there. She feels like something wants her to go into that water to die. So she stops, and she has to fight that overwhelming mom instinct to save that thing out there that is the spitting image of her daughter. Nora slowly backs out of the surf and takes off running to the cottage, crying the entire time. Her little girl greets her at the door, and Nora has never in her life been so happy to see her. To this day, she's convinced that the thing in the water was her little girl's doppelganger trying to lure her to her death. She knows they say that you can only see your own double, but she wonders about that. Nora hopes this never happens again, and she hopes that it never happens to anyone who's hearing the story, because the desire she felt to plunge into the dangerous water that day was stronger than any force she has ever known. The original poster of this story didn't give his name, so we're going to call him Aaron. Aaron was 24, and he worked at a regular Cube City office. One morning, his alarm doesn't go off, and he oversleeps. When he wakes up, he's already 30 minutes late for work. He gets dressed as fast as he can, races into work, worried that he's going to be fired for being late. He makes it to the office, parks his car, and runs into the building. And as he steps off the elevator, he notices people giving him weird looks. Everyone's staring at him. He starts to panic because he thinks they all know he's a dead man walking. When he sees his desk, things go from weird to terrifying. There's a man sitting in his cubicle typing on his computer. The man turns his head and looks over his shoulder. Their eyes meet, and Aaron feels the blood freeze in his veins. The man sitting at the desk is him. Same clothes, same hair, same face. And the man looks at Aaron, startled, and starts to frantically pack up his papers. As Aaron's walking toward him, he suddenly darts out of the cubicle and runs around the corner. Aaron runs after him, hoping to catch him, but as he turns the corner, there's nobody there. Even worse, everyone's looking at Aaron like he's crazy. He checked the entire office, but there is no trace of the other him. He asks his coworkers who'd been around the area of his desk, but all they say is that his desk has been empty all morning. They haven't seen anybody. Aaron feels like he's going crazy because no one else saw this guy who looked exactly like him sitting at his desk. And the way this guy ran away was like he knew he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. Aaron goes into the bathroom and splashes some water on his face and feels totally weirded out by the sight of his own reflection in the mirror. Aaron quit his job at the end of that week and never went back. And it's been years since this happened, but he still finds looking at his own reflection in a mirror very unsettling. There's no name given by the original poster of this story, so we'll call her Eve. Eve's dad works the night shift. He's got to get up at 3 a.m. every morning to get to work on time. Eve would sometimes wake up and go downstairs and give him a hug before he left. One morning, when she's about 4, she gets to the bottom of the stairs and notices that the front door is open a bit. When she opens it up all the way, she sees her father walking down the driveway to his truck, dressed in his work uniform. And she calls out to him, "Daddy, come back!" because she wants her hug before he leaves. Her dad slowly turns around and just stares at her. He was giving her such a strange look that Eve starts to get scared and starts crying and asking him what's wrong. He doesn't answer and just keeps walking towards her. And just before he reaches her, Eve feels a pair of arms grab her from behind. She turns around and freaks out when she sees her dad behind her. He's dressed in his work uniform and is staring at his doppelganger. The other dad takes one look at her real dad and runs down the driveway. Her dad pulls her into the house, shuts the door, and locks it. Now, Eve would have dismissed this as just her overactive 4-year-old imagination, but her dad saw it too. He refuses to talk about it, but her mom told Eve that he was so freaked out that he didn't go to work that day, and she spent the rest of the day reassuring him that he wasn't nuts. This story is from Reddit poster He-Mew-Lou, so we're going to call him Lewis. This encounter happened when Lewis was 8 years old. He saw his dad in the bathroom drying himself after a shower. But the problem is, his dad was supposed to be at work. So Lewis asks him, "Hey Dad, when did you get home?" His dad doesn't say anything. Lewis asks again, and his dad closes the bathroom door in his face. So Lewis leaves, not really thinking much of it. 20 minutes later, his mom gives him and his little brother some lunch. So all 3 of them sit down to eat. And Lewis asks his mom, "Why aren't we waiting for Dad?" And she laughs and says, "Why would we do that? He's not going to be home for a while." "But Dad is home," Lewis says, and explains to her what happened in the bathroom. They search the entire house, but can't find him. After lunch, Lewis and his little brother fall asleep while their mom is watching TV. Lewis is startled awake from his mom screaming. He rushes to look for her and finds her standing at the bathroom door. She is completely speechless, so just grabs Lewis and gives him a big hug. Lewis looks at the bathroom, but it's empty. He asks his mom, "What happened?" And she says, I saw Dad. Dad was here. And she tells him she saw that thing that looked like Dad make a horribly creepy face, and that's what made her scream. And when Louis came running, the thing disappeared. When Louis's dad gets home later that night, his mom tells him what happened. And Louis says he doesn't remember what they did after that, but they moved out. Danielle has always believed in the paranormal and supernatural, and she used to wish she was sensitive and could have experienced more odd occurrences. She doesn't wish that anymore. She's had a few occurrences through her life that she would describe as paranormal, the scariest of which involved a doppelganger of her father. The whole time she lived at her parents' house, from a kid to an adult, she always felt uncomfortable going downstairs by herself at night. It always made her feel as though she was being watched. Most of the time, if she had to go down after everyone else has gone up, it was to get a bottle of water from the pantry. The kitchen was set to the left of the staircase, and she had to walk down the length of the wall to reach the pantry, and then turn her back on the scariest part of the room, the back door. It didn't appear scary. It was just a door that was mostly a window with a large glass pane set into the majority of the center of the wood. Oddly enough, the huge bay windows next to the door didn't scare her like that door did. She was always afraid she'd see something or someone looking at her through that glass door. And one night, that's exactly what happened. Danielle is getting a bottle of water, and usually when she has to do that, she won't let herself look at the back door until she's on her way back upstairs. And tonight's no exception. She gets her water, goes back to the stairs, and reaches to turn the kitchen lights off while raising her eyes to the door. And standing outside with his face inches away from the glass pane is the image of her dad. But he looks wrong. His eyes are wide, but not like he's scared. It's like he's been waiting to see her, and now that he has, he's excited. The only thing is, she had just said goodnight to her dad 2 minutes ago and watched him go up into his room with her mom and lock the door. There was no opportunity for him to have come back downstairs without him having to pass her. All this goes through her head in a split second as she meets the thing's wide, hungry gaze, and she bolts up the stairs. And she leaves the lights on as she runs, thinking that maybe this thing moves in the dark and it would have a hard time getting in the house with no darkness to slip through. And she sees on her way to her room that her parents' door is still shut. And she runs into her room and locks the door. She leaves the lights on and curls up on her bed, secretly hoping that her dad has just somehow pranked her and is going to come and say that he's sorry for scaring her, like he always does after a prank. He'll laugh about it, but if he sees that it actually scares her, he'll always come and give her a big hug and apologize. Danielle waits several minutes for the knock on her door, but it never comes. After 20 minutes or so, her heartbeat finally getting closer to a normal range, she goes to her parents' door and knocks, being sure to keep an eye out behind her. Her dad groans, "Come in," and she walks to his side, whispering, "Dad, were you just outside like 20 minutes ago?" Dad gives her a weird look and says, "I haven't been outside since I was cleaning the pool earlier this evening. That was like 4 hours ago." Danielle keeps the rest of the story to herself until the following morning, asking him again if there's any chance that he had gone outside and just forgot. But he said, not a chance. He assumed she'd been dreaming and tried to comfort her, but she knows it was real. Something that looked like her father wanted her to see it that night. Danielle doesn't live with her parents anymore, but whenever she visits and has to come downstairs at night for water, she looks dead at the door every time. She doesn't want it to know how afraid of it she really is, if it ever reappears. As of yet, it hasn't, but she's waiting for the day it does. She doesn't know what she'll do when that day comes, but she's pretty sure that it will. One night, Taylor goes to work at the area prison as usual. And his supervisor looks confused and says, "What are you doing here?" And Taylor says, "Well, I work tonight." And the supervisor says, "But they said you called in a few hours ago saying that you're sick." Taylor's a bit confused and says, "Well, it must have been somebody else and they got the message wrong." He goes to work in the control room where he usually works. And after he relieves the guard on duty and settles in for the night, he looks at the message that said he called in. The message says that he had called at 6:50 and said that he'd gotten sick while he was outside cleaning up after the storm. There had been a storm the night before, and it was pretty bad, but not bad enough to clean up after. The supervisor, Dave, who's also a friend of Taylor's outside of work, comes into the control room and they start talking about it and how odd it is. And Taylor decides to call his wife at home and tell her about it. He picks up the phone and dials. After 2 rings, a man picks up the phone and with a raspy voice says, "Hello?" Taylor didn't know what to say for a few seconds. He looks at the phone to make sure that he dialed the right number, and he did. And after a couple more seconds, the person again says, "Hello?" in that same raspy voice. Taylor finally squeaks out a very weak, "Hello? Who is this?"
"This is Taylor. Who is this?"
Taylor's head starts spinning because his name is Taylor too. And starting to get really freaked out, he says in almost a scream, "Where's Anne?" The man says, "Anne's in bed. Who is this?" Taylor drops the phone and tells his supervisor, "Ring me out. I gotta get home." And he takes off toward the door. He could hear Dave pick up the phone behind him and say, "Hello?" followed soon after by a loud, "What the f***?" Taylor runs to his car and drives home slightly faster than the posted speed limit, his mind racing the entire time. He busts through the door and his wife is sitting watching TV and is surprised to see him home. He asks her who is there, and she says, "Nobody's been here." And after a rather long chat with his wife, Taylor goes to call the prison and tell them what's going on. But the phone is dead. He goes back to work, and when he gets in, Dave is acting weird and asks him, "How the hell are you doing this?" He tells Taylor that when Taylor left, he picked up the phone and the person on the other end sounded just like him. Dave kind of freaked out and hung up the phone. A minute later, as Dave can see Taylor's car leaving the parking lot, the other Taylor called back from home and asked, "What the f*** is going on?" He said that he was a bit pissed off and that he was sick and did not feel like playing games, and told Dave, "Stop pranking me," and hung up. Both men are speechless. It takes Taylor a while to convince Dave that he has no idea what's going on, but they finally get back to work. Later, Taylor finds out that the phone line for his area had been knocked down in the storm the night before, and his phone had not been working all night. And he says, "This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me." If you would like a double dose of doppelgangers, go ahead and click here. Be careful out there, and we will see you again on the In-Between.